des extensions web pour des millions d'utilisateurs développées uniquement en HTML, CSS et JavaScript. Oui, c'est possible. Et Oliver va nous montrer comment. WebExtensions est un écosystème en pleine transformation, vous allez le découvrir. Et la bonne nouvelle, c'est que vous pouvez y contribuer. Oliver, from the Google Chrome team, takes a look at building extension and some of the interesting capabilities available for you to use. Make some noise, please, for Oliver.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Oliver Dunk. I'm a developer relations engineer on the Google Chrome team. And my talk today is called Become a Wizard and Make the Browser Your Own. So I really want to talk to you about some of the technology that you can use to customize the browser to do what you want it to do. Now, if we just move on, I want to start by getting to know you. So hello, fellow wizards. You're all sort of my recruits today. I'm going to try and teach you something. I'm curious just to know how many of you would see yourselves as software engineers. So if you'd see yourself as a software engineer, raise your hand. I think I'd put my hand up. Wow, OK, almost everyone. So that's really awesome. I've done this talk a few other times. When I've given this talk in the past, we had more designers and product managers in the audience. And I think there's something in this talk for everyone. So if you're a software engineer, I hope you can get a bit of a taste for some of the APIs and libraries that you can use for building extensions and actually sort of understand on a technical level how they work. If you're a designer or a product manager, then I really hope that you can learn about sort of some of the capabilities and what's possible in the browser. Because actually, I think sometimes understanding what's possible is really important. Because if you're sort of planning your next product or coming up with a design, then it's really useful just to know what's possible, and then you can learn sort of the actual details of how to do it when you need to. But if you don't learn sort of what's possible, then you don't even know where to start or what you can do. Now, I said that I was a web developer, at least I consider myself one now, but I wasn't always a web developer. So I remember this story. I was back at school. I was in my IT, like information technology classes, and the teacher said that today we were going to be learning to make websites. And I was really excited because I'd never made a website before. I didn't know how you would even go about doing that. I didn't know like what software would you use and what would you need to write and like anything about the equipment that you'd need. And so this was very exciting to me. And have a think about what software you think we might have used. I'm almost certain that you'll guess wrong. The piece of software that we decided to use for that lesson was Excel. And I mean, I'm actually being a little bit harsh. I was quite impressed by the lesson. There's a surprising amount that you can do in Excel. So you can take images and then move them around, and I guess you sort of get an idea for how to make layout. You can have buttons, and those buttons can have scripts, and using those scripts, you can have sort of things that happen when you click the button. Maybe you go between pages or different actions happen. You can even sort of have some like controls that lock down the sheet to prevent people from changing things you don't want them to change. So you can do a lot with Excel. But I felt at heart like that's not really how websites are made. It kind of felt like if you've seen this meme before. I was asking to make websites, and I was being told, we have all the tools at home, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. And then in reality, we were building things in a spreadsheet. And I knew that that wasn't really how things were made. And then I discovered HTML, and I realized that HTML was how websites are actually made. And this was really powerful because even though I definitely didn't know everything about HTML at this point, I at least understood what I needed to search for to actually learn more. I could search for sort of how do you do this in HTML, and I could build my knowledge, and that just unlocked a world of possibilities for me. And so today I want to try and do the same thing for you, but rather than with HTML, with extensions. So I'm not going to tell you everything that you could possibly know about extensions, but my hope is that I can at least give you that initial seed of this is where you start, this is what you need to search for, and then from there, if you decide to build your own extension, the rest will follow. Now today, I'm going to be talking about Chrome extensions and web extensions interchangeably. And there's actually a lot of overlap. So Chrome extensions is what we call extensions in Chrome, but they're based on the web extensions platform. And that's a set of shared APIs which are implemented by all of the major browsers. So almost everything that I talked to you about today is for Chrome, but also for Firefox, Safari, and Edge. So you can build one extension that works everywhere. And then once you've built your extension, you can publish it to the world. So this is the Chrome Web Store. This is our extension store in Chrome, but there are stores for other browsers as well. And one of the really great things about these stores is it's a really nice way to find an audience. Usually once you've built something, it's exciting just having something for yourself, but it would be even more exciting if other people could use that thing. And by publishing to these stores, you can find an audience. And I've definitely seen firsthand developers who had an idea, they published it to the store, and then very quickly they got hundreds or thousands or even millions of users. And it's nice because there are fewer developers building extensions. So if you have a problem that you think you can solve with extensions, then maybe you can be the first person to solve that, and that can help you to find an audience. So I think this is a really exciting space. So let's get started, and let's look at sort of how to build a basic extension. So there's two files that you need to build an extension. The first one, or actually there's only one file that you need, but then we're going to look at a second file. The one file that you need is a file called manifest.json. And this is a JSON file which describes some basic information about the extension, and it's read by the browser to understand your extension. So there's the name key. This is a human-readable name for your extension. So it's useful when the user goes to, for example, their settings and they want to see what extensions they have installed. They have a way of identifying your extension because they can see the name. There's also the version key. So this is both also a human-readable version. So maybe if the user wants to know what version they have to look at a changelog, or maybe if they want to report a bug, they can see the version that you have. But also so that behind the scenes, when the browser's doing its update process, it can actually see if the new version that it has is newer than the one which is currently installed. We have the manifest version, which is the version of the extensions platform that you're building on. So we really try and avoid making breaking changes, but sometimes we have to. And whenever we make a breaking change, we increment this manifest version. And that's a way for you to tell the browser sort of the APIs and the behaviors that you're expecting. And so when the web browser loads the extension, it can see, OK, this is manifest version 3. And if it supports that, it can load your extension. If not, it can say, oh, this is an extension built with an older version of the platform. I don't support that. And it can sort of gracefully end things there. There's the description key. You can probably guess what that one does. That one really is just a description of your extension. It's shown in the UI and in the store if you upload your extension. And then we have the content scripts key. And the content scripts key allows you to specify scripts that you want the browser to inject into web pages on your behalf. So we can walk through how this works. We have this sort of matches key. And so this matches key is saying, what are the sites where I want this content script to run? So you can see I'm specifying example.com, and then I have the /*, that's just sort of a wildcard. So it's saying, regardless of the page, if we're on example.com, then I want to inject this script. And then we have the JS key, and it's an array of scripts that we want to inject. And you can see I'm just specifying content.js. So effectively, what this is doing is telling the browser that when we go to example.com, I want you to inject this content.js file into that page, just sort of as if you'd added another script tag. And you can then do whatever you like inside of that script. And hopefully you can imagine how this is already quite powerful. If you've ever used a user script extension, like Tamper Monkey maybe, then this is very similar. Or if you've never written something like that, you can hopefully just imagine how once you have the ability to run a script on any page, then you could start to influence that page. You could add extra content or read through the HTML and do sort of interesting things. And so this really, in itself, unlocks a world of possibilities. And then that content.js is really simple. Like in this case, I just have console.log hello world. So this would just add hello world to the console. But you can do whatever you like here. There are also some special APIs that you have access to. So there are lots of possibilities. So one example, maybe you have a login form. And so this is for our site. It's for magicians only. So we don't want to let anyone else come in here. Maybe this is where we're discussing our secrets or making plans for our next big trick. And the user wants to be able to easily add their credentials. And so you could use a password manager, and password managers work based on this content scripts concept. So password managers have a content script registered in their manifest. It runs on all of your sites, and it's adding an event listener whenever you click into an input field. And then when you click on an input field, you get a drop-down that has some suggestions as to what you could fill. And then we can click one of these suggestions, and using sort of the input element.value sort of property in JavaScript, we can change the value of that input field. And so hopefully you can already see how quite a useful tool could be built using extensions. There are other things that we can do as well. So maybe we want to build some sort of extension that helps you to understand content on the page. So maybe you select a word, and then you get some sort of tooltip which shows you the definition of that word. And again, this is fully possible just using those content scripts that we learned about. So your content script could register a listener that's listening for the user to select a word on the page. And then once you select a word, we can sort of do like element.append child to append a child into the HTML, and we can append our little tooltip that has the definition. And so lots of capabilities, all just using this content scripts concept. But how about another context? What else can we do in extensions? Well, one other context is the side panel. And the side panel is a great place to add additional context to the page. So we've just talked about how content scripts work, but one of the problems with content scripts is that you're injecting directly into the page that's made by the web developer. And sometimes that's what you want. It can be very useful. But the tricky thing about that is that you're sort of interfering with the page. And so maybe you're sort of getting in the way of what the user's trying to see. Maybe if the page has some style sheets that are applying lots of styles, this actually causes a problem because then the content that you're injecting into the page is being changed by their styles, and you end up with this sort of mess where you're trying to compete with them, and it can be quite tricky. So the side panel is nice because it gives you this sort of isolated context on the left or right of the page. You can kind of think it a little bit like an iframe, but the whole page actually shifts across to make room for it. And this is a really nice place where your extension can show some UI. And so I'll show you a few examples of that. One, we can sort of go back to that dictionary define word example. So let's imagine that we're on Wikipedia and we're looking at the page for browser extension. And maybe I don't know what extension means, actually. In this case, there's a whole Wikipedia article telling me, so that's not very helpful. But my extension is adding this new context menu item. And so this is another thing that extensions can do, where they actually add a new item in the context menu. And when you click that context menu item, it will run some code in your extension. It will pass along the word that the user has selected. And you can then do whatever you like. So for example, in this case, when I click that define word context menu item, you can see it actually shows the definition within the side panel. And so this is a really nice way, again, to show some content alongside the page that you're looking at. One more example that I really like of this is this sort of AI summary example. This is actually one of the open source examples that we have on GitHub that you can look at. And the idea behind this is that it gives you a summary of the article that you're reading. So in this case, I'm on this article by Bramus on our team. He's talking about some new styling capabilities with the HTML details element. But maybe I'm in a rush and I don't have time to read all of this. Well, we can pass it to an LLM, we can get a summary, and we can show that in the side panel. And again, this is really nice because it's not in the way, it's not covering any of the content, but it's there if we need it. If you want to find the source code for this, it's all on GitHub, so you can go to this URL, feel free to take a photo. And we have all of the sample code for both this example and some of the other examples that I'm going to show. So how does this actually work? Well, one of the key pieces is this library that Mozilla has. So this is the readability library. And this is actually what Mozilla uses for their reader mode. So if you're in Firefox and you're looking at some content and you click on the reader mode button, it uses this library to actually look through all of the HTML and condense that down into some more readable content, maybe remove anything that's not needed. And we can actually use that same library to pass through the document. So in this case, I'm giving it an entire clone of the HTML document, so that's just all of the HTML and DOM tree associated with the page. And then I'm passing it into this readability class and telling it to go ahead and pass all of the content. And this doesn't give us a summary at this stage, but it does strip out a lot of the HTML. We just get the raw text that's associated with that page. And so in this case, it would just be all of the text associated with that article. And that maybe sounds trivial, but if you've ever tried to do something like that, you know it's a hard problem. There is so much else on pages, from script tags to ads to other styling and other things. So being able to just get the text of the article is actually in itself quite an achievement. And then once we've done that, we get something like this. So this is the actual output of that library. You can see it basically has like the site name, it has the publish time if it can find it, and then it has the text content. So the text content is the actual text of that article. And we need a way to summarize that, and we can actually do that using some of the built-in AI APIs that are supported in Chrome. So these are APIs which run entirely locally on your device, and let you use some AI capabilities within the browser. So in this case, we can actually add on to our code example that we have, and we can create an instance of the summarizer. And the summarizer, as the name might suggest, is a little utility that will allow you to pass some text, and then it will actually produce a summary of that text. Now, these are local models, so they do have to be downloaded to your device. And so that's why in this first line, we're actually doing this summarizer.availability check. And we're checking if the summarizer is available. Now, in some cases, the summarizer might just not be available for whatever reason. So you maybe need some sort of fallback or some UI there to tell the user that, unfortunately, we can't run in that case. The other case is that sometimes the summarizer can be available, but just hasn't been downloaded yet. And in that case, there's actually a different response that you get. So you can say to the user, hold tight, we're just downloading this model. And you can show some UI while you wait for it to be downloaded. And then you can see the API itself is really simple. So once we actually have the summarizer, we can just call session.summarize, and we can get a full summary of the article. And then that's what I end up producing here. So the summarizer actually gives us this nice sort of markdown format, and then I have some code that renders that output from the summarizer as this sort of markdown list. So we've spoken about two different contexts now. We've spoken about the content scripts, which let us sort of inject a script into the page, and we've spoken about the side panel that lets us sort of show some content alongside the page. But I want to show you some more contexts. So I can actually use a pop-up. And the idea behind a pop-up is that it allows us to show some content sort of overlaid on top of the page. You can see this sort of prevents us from interacting with the page. So this is more if you think the user's focus is actually switching entirely away from the page to your extension. And in this case, like you can still use content from the page and context from the page, so you can still get access to what's on the page, but it's just sort of when the user's focus is fully switching. And actually, you've maybe started to figure out, if you haven't figured out already, this whole sort of presentation is actually just a browser extension. So this is just running in Chrome. I have my slides, and then I have the side panel, and then the pop-up like I'm showing you here. Inside the pop-up, you can see how we register a pop-up. So we just go back to that manifest that we had earlier, and we add this action key. And in the action key, we can add a title, which is sort of what shows if I hover over the icon here. So it's quite small, but maybe you can see that. And then we also have this default pop-up key, which is just saying, by default, which HTML file do we want to show in the pop-up when the user opens the pop-up. And this can just sort of be very similar to what we have already. And we can use some other built-in AI APIs here. So if we go back to our slides here, we have a number of APIs. I've only shown you one so far. We have these APIs which are shipping today, so the Summarizer API, the Language Detector API, the Translator API. And then we also have some APIs which are currently only shipping in extensions. So one of those is the Prompt API, and the Prompt API gives us access to a very sort of chat-like interface where we can send it a prompt, and then we can get a response back. And so we can actually use that in the pop-up here. So you can see I have this little chat where I'm chatting with a wizard, and the wizard is asking how it can help us. So I'm actually not sure what I should do next, so I'm just going to ask, what should I do next? And when I hit enter, what's going to happen is that we're going to create an instance of the prompt API locally. We're going to send my text prompt to the prompt API. And I've actually given the prompt API sort of a system prompt, so I've given it some context around what's going to happen, hopefully, in the rest of the presentation to sort of guide it towards where it should tell me to go next. So let's see if this works. It's always a bit nerve-wracking running AI live on the stage, but fingers crossed. OK, so it says we should open my browser's DevTools for a little surprise. And this really is live. So this will generally always be a very similar response because I've very much guided it in the system prompt that it should tell me to open DevTools. But this is really running the built-in prompt API. So if we regenerate this, maybe we might get a slightly different answer. You see, in this case, it decided not to go for the emoji. That one looks very similar. But you can see we do get a different response every time. So this is quite a fun way just to add some variation. And so let's actually do what it told us to do. So let's open DevTools. And in DevTools, you can see I've actually added more slides. So one of the things that you can do in an extension is you can register additional UI which shows within DevTools. And so this is really exciting if you want to build some sort of developer tooling, because often when you're building developer tooling, you can build that sort of as a website, but it might feel more at home if it's actually in the browser's DevTools where the user is coming. So this is registered very similarly to everything else we've looked at. So we add this new DevTools_page key in the manifest. And this specifies a page that's going to be loaded by the browser sort of behind the scenes in the background. And this is where we can start setting up our DevTools UI. Now, despite what you might think, this actually isn't the page which is going to be shown here. This is purely a page that runs in the background. And then within that devtools.html file, we can have a script that actually runs some code with these special APIs that lets us interact with DevTools. So in this case, I'm using this special chrome.devtools API. I'm saying chrome.devtools.panels.create. And then I can tell it that I want the title of this part of DevTools to be more slides. I can give it an icon. And I can also give it the name of the actual panel that it's going to put into the iframe. So you can see in this case, we're actually having this devtools_panel.html. And this is actually what's showing here. We can check that by doing something really fun. I don't know if you've seen this before, but I always think when you see this for the first time, it just is completely mind-blowing. So what we can do, we can open DevTools in a pop-out window. So this is still like DevTools. We can switch to the Elements panel or the console. But then within here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the shortcut to open DevTools one more time. And DevTools is actually itself a web application. So DevTools is built in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So if I run this again, what we now have is what's called DevTools on DevTools. So this is DevTools open inspecting DevTools. And you can see, for example, if I go to the console and I click here, you can see everything that's injected, including my DevTools panel. And so this is useful if you're debugging some of these DevTools features and extensions. Otherwise, not very useful. But I just think super fun. It's a cool party trick that you can whip out. Maybe only to developers. I think anyone else might just think you're a bit weird. But yeah, this is good fun. All right, I'm going to put this back to the side, and we can carry on. And yeah, this is an example of some of the things that you can build. So actually, this is a really nice story where, for a long time, extensions have always had these APIs where you can store data. So this is similar to IndexedDB on the web or local storage. But we have a special Chrome.storage API where you can store data in extensions. And for a long time, there was no way to see that in DevTools. But we actually built a DevTools extension which lets you inspect that data. And so we just added a new tab to DevTools where you could actually see all of the data within that API. And then eventually we realized this is actually something that users find very helpful, so we built it into Chrome by default. But I think this is a really nice story of how you can use extensions to prototype developer tooling for something which doesn't currently have developer tooling today. And more APIs await. I've shown you one of those Chrome.devtools APIs, the Create Panel API, but there are also other APIs that you can use to sort of influence DevTools to add new panels and do various things. So there are lots of capabilities there. OK, let's go back to the rest of my slides. I'm going to close everything that we have open. We've spoken about the prompt API in extensions. One thing that I want to talk about is how do we decide on new APIs? So we've spoken about sort of some of the APIs that we have. And for something like the prompt API or the summarizer API, we've sort of designed those in the open, but they are currently only in Chrome. But as I mentioned, a lot of the APIs that we have, especially for the web extensions ecosystem, are across all of the browsers. So we do actually have a process where we meet with the other browsers to decide on what those new APIs should be. And so for this, we have the W3C WebExtensions Community Group. And so this is a community group where we meet with the other browser vendors in the community to discuss what we should add to the extensions platform. If you're familiar with the idea of a working group, a community group is similar. It's just sort of a less formal step along that journey. So we started as a community group where we don't sort of have any deliverables like a specification that we have to produce, but we're just sort of trying to welcome things more informally. And then our hope is at some point, maybe even in the next year or so, we'll turn into a working group, and then we'll actually be sort of mandated by the charter to produce a specification. But this is the group. So we have a public repository on GitHub. Again, it's a little bit small. I apologize. But you can see sort of we have issues open here. So any developer who wants to add something to the extensions platform can go ahead and open an issue there, and then we'll discuss that. So we have public meetings every 2 weeks where we get together and we talk through all of those issues, and we decide if that's something that we might want to add to the platform. And we make sure to get the voices of all of the browser vendors in the community, and sort of decide how we want to approach that. And then once we've decided that this is actually an API that we want to add, then we write a more formal proposal. So you can see we have some open pull requests, and we actually open a pull request where we're adding sort of a longer document. We fill out a template where we have, like, this is the API that we'd like to add. These are some of the sort of nuances around, like, some of the behavior that might be less intuitive to sort of make sure we get all of the details figured out. And then that's really great because that means that hopefully once it's implemented by all of the browsers, it's going to be implemented in the same way. So a really nice example is this runtime.getVersion API. So you might have seen when we had the manifest file, if we went all the way back to the start of the talk, we had that version field. And that's quite useful. Maybe in your extension, you want to display to the user the version of the extension. And so we saw that a lot of developers were trying to display the version of the extension. And previously, we didn't have an API to directly get that. So what developers were doing is they were calling another API, runtime.getManifest, and that gives you access to the entire manifest of the extension. And then they would do runtime.getManifest.version, and that would allow them to access the version key, and then you could display that. But we realized this is just sort of not as easy as it should be. I mean, it's not too hard, but like this is something that developers are doing frequently, so we wanted to make that easier. And so we actually just went ahead and opened an issue on GitHub to discuss this. So I opened this issue. This is a proposal to add a runtime.getVersion method. And you can see I sort of added some justification to say, like, there's already significant usage of this runtime.getManifest call. And if we add a new method, it will simplify getting this data. Long term, maybe we don't need getManifest anymore because getManifest is actually quite an old API that has some quirks about it. So it would be nice to move away from that. And so this was the proposal. And it was amazing how quickly everything moved. So you can see I opened this 2 weeks ago. So this was September 29th, 2025. And then if we scroll down, there was some discussion. You can see already Safari added their supportive label this same day, actually. So very quick. And then if we move slightly further down, you can see they opened a WebKit issue. And then somewhere here, I'm trying to find it, there's actually a WebKit commit. So this was actually implemented. You see it's in Safari Technology Preview. And I'm trying to find, here we go. So you can see there was a commit to WebKit, add support for browser.runtime.getVersion. And WebKit is the basis of Safari. So once this landed, that meant that this would end up in Safari. And so very quickly, in less than 2 weeks, we were able to go from having an idea to having this in both Chrome and Safari. Something I didn't show is that I also implemented this in Chrome. So we had it in 2 browsers. And we're actually working on getting it elsewhere as well. So I mean, Edge is just based on the Chromium code base. So the work to add it in Chrome also resulted in that being added in Edge. So I'm not sure if that's shipped in Edge yet, but it should be in Edge soon. And then for Firefox, actually one of our community members went ahead and implemented this because all of the browsers are open source, so anyone can contribute. And if we find it somewhere here, yeah, there's a Firefox issue. And if I scroll slightly further down, there's actually a linked patch. And so this is the patch, if I can find this. This is actually implementing it into Firefox. So this is really exciting because in just 2 weeks, we're able to add that API to multiple browsers. And this is really the power of having these community groups, is that it's a really nice place for us to keep the platforms in sync, to keep them lined up. And this is something that you can all contribute to. So I think in the description of this talk, I sort of said, you know, this isn't a community that one person can build. This is something that everyone can build. This is something that is available to everyone. And so if you start building extensions and you realize that there are pieces that are missing or APIs that you'd really like to see, then you can go ahead and open an issue, join some of our meetings, and actually help shape the platform. And I just think that's really exciting. I don't think there are many things that you can do where you can say that some small idea you had turns into something which is shipping in multiple browsers to millions or even billions of users. So just to sort of recap what we've seen today, we've seen quite a few different contexts. We've seen the idea of extension pages and content scripts and the side panel, the pop-up and the DevTools panel. These are all really powerful. You can do a lot with these. And there are some really brilliant extensions which just use these capabilities. But actually, there's a lot more to see. There are capabilities that we haven't even spoken about at all. So the options page is a way to basically specify some content which shows within Chrome settings for your extension. So Maybe your extension runs on the page, but you actually want the user to be able to turn it on or off for particular pages. Or it runs on the page, but you want them to be able to configure some setting about the exact feature that it's implementing in, so you can have an options page that does all of that. We have a notifications API, so your extension can send notifications. So maybe you have an extension which is doing something interesting. Maybe it's waiting for a product to become available somewhere where it's been out of stock for a while, or waiting for some concert tickets to go live. You can have your extension checking in the background, and then using the notifications API, you can actually send a notification to the user once there's sort of something to tell them. We also have the Omnibox API. So the Omnibox is what we call sort of this top box in the browser, where you can do lots of things, hence the Omni. And this basically allows you to register a keyword so that then when the user types into the Omnibox, this address bar up here, your extension is invoked. And so this can be a really nice way to add lots of interesting capabilities. Maybe you can add some sort of custom search results by searching a particular site, or you can even have some sort of quick actions. I don't know if anyone has used, even just like Spotlight on Mac if you press Command Space, or there are sort of third-party tools which do something similar. You could add something similar in the Omnibox, where the user is able to invoke some action in your extension purely based on this. I saw a really nice demo recently where somebody was basically using that to then call into some of the AI APIs and give some sort of AI responses within the Omnibox. I think that's really cool. That's everything that I have to say. I do want to call out the QR code for the sort of feedback for the talk. This is really useful. One of the things that can happen quite often is that you give a talk like this, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to give talks a few times a year. But then you hear nothing about what people liked and what people didn't like, and so you go ahead and give the same talk again and again. And it doesn't feel like I learned anything from that. It also feels like that doesn't make things better for the next audience. So please do scan this, and then you can leave some feedback, either sort of, I think there's an open text box, or you can just click some buttons and say, I like this bit about the talk, but this bit of the talk was a bit boring or too technical or whatever. So yeah, this is really helpful. Please do this if you can. But otherwise, that's everything from me. Thank you so much for listening. I've really enjoyed this talk. I hope you have as well. Thank you.